Hello, welcome to the Math Together show, where thoughtful math educators gather and learn together. I'm Molly Vokey.
I'm Heidi Subnani.
And I'm Sue Looney.
We are so happy you're here today. We have a wonderful guest that we're so excited to talk about. She is from Florida, but she's not here with us today, obviously, as nobody ever is in this virtual world that we live in right now. Sue, why don't you tell us what we're going to talk about today?
Okay, great. So we are going to be welcoming our guest in, and she's going to be talking to us about our key question, which is to be looking at the mathematics for teaching and kind of unpacking what does that mean? What is our mathematics for teaching?
Excellent. So we are very excited that you are here and can join us. We were very privileged to hear Dr. Adams a number of years ago in San Antonio, and we've really been looking forward to having this conversation with her today. We would love if you could say hello in the chat and or hit like below. That would be great, and let us know where you are listening or watching from, and we would love to say hello. You can also ask any questions in the chat box as well, and we will do what we can to discuss some of those. As you know, the Math Together Learning Community is currently closed, but we do have a waiting list for when we reopen in the new year, and we would love to have you join us then. However, if you are interested in speaking with one of us, we always have our coffee chats available where you can contact us at Looney Math, and one of us would be happy to speak with you about a problem or a concern that you have in your math class.
Great.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Thomasenia Adams, who is a professor of mathematics education in the College of Education at the University of Florida. She also serves as the college's Associate Dean for Research and Faculty Development. Dr. Adams leads an extensive and active career in mathematics education. Most recently, she co-published 2 books of a 4-book series, Making Sense of Mathematics for Teaching for Grades K-2, and another for Grades 3 to 5. She followed up the series with a partner book, Making Sense of Mathematics for Teaching Girls in Grades K-5. She is currently an associate editor of the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics Journal, Mathematics Teaching, Learning and Teaching, Pre-K to 12. Dr. Adams is a co-leader of DNA Mathematics and has facilitated mathematics professional development to teachers across the nation. Having served as a mathematics instruction coach across grades K to 12, Dr. Adams' approach to mathematics teaching and learning is focused on empowering learners to develop conceptual understanding of mathematics.
Wow.
And yes, very impressive. So let's bring in Dr. Thomasenia. Hello, welcome.
Hello, thank you.
Yes.
We're so thrilled to have you here with us today and really appreciate you giving of your time and your expertise. And we know that those listening will really learn a lot and get a lot from what you are saying. We know that we have, on the occasions that we've been fortunate enough to hear you speak. So we really appreciate you being here. And Sue has, I think, our first question.
I do. And yeah, I'm having like a small fangirl moment because we heard you speak at the NCTM annual conference in San Antonio, and you gave an Ignite talk, and it was so inspirational. And I've followed your work and used your resources, and I want to really express gratitude for your being here. But I get to ask this question of you, and I love this question. We've been asking all of our guests to talk about what is your why, sort of, why do you do what you do? What drives you and led you on your journey to be here in front of us today doing what you do?
Awesome question. Let me first say thank you for having me here. It certainly is my pleasure. So what is my why? I think I will go all the way back to being a little girl at Bethlehem Baptist Church, because as long as I can remember, my mother was a Sunday school teacher. So really in our home, she was my first example of what a teacher is. And as a little girl, I remember every Saturday night she would sit with her Bible, her Sunday school materials, and she would read. I would see her reading and underlining things, and I had no clue what she was doing. I just knew this was important work to her, because when she was doing this, it was like the whole house had to be still. So be quiet, because Mama is studying her Sunday school lesson. Right. So, that was like my first example of what a teacher was. But also at Bethlehem Baptist Church, there were a lot of things that happened as a child, and I really didn't know why. And I would ask my mother about it. So I give you one example. When the deacons would sing hymns, one of the deacons would always read the lines of the hymn first. So if they were singing Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound, he would get up and he would read that out of the book first. Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. And then everybody would sing. And so I remember asking my mom, why do they read the hymns first? And she said to me that it goes way back to when a lot of people were not able to read and write. And so if you had one person in the congregation that could read and teach everyone else the hymns, then that was so important. And they kept that tradition. They call it the lining of the hymns. Yeah. And so that was sort of my second introduction to this person standing in front of this crowd and teaching them something, like teaching them the words of this song. And the third example that I have that supports my why is growing up as a little girl, the green and beige encyclopedia. Do you all remember those things? The World Encyclopedia. Yeah. Like those things were like treasures. Like you better not touch them unless you are really ready to learn something. Right. And I remember us having a set of those things, and they were so treasured. And at the time, I really didn't know why, that we couldn't write in them or color in them or touch them even, unless you really wanted to know something. But that was my parents' way of providing support for education for myself and my 7 siblings. That was a resource that not every family had. I remember visiting my aunts and other cousins, and they didn't have that set of those green and beige books, but we had one, and it was just really so important. So I think my why goes back to being that little girl and early on knowing that there were some people that couldn't read. Like I knew that as a young child, that there were adults that couldn't read. I also knew that evidently there were some books that were important to people. Like this is something that you treasure. And along the way, I just tried to make sense of that. And as a child, I collected all of these things, but I'll tell you this, it wasn't until I was 21 years old that I realized that my father was illiterate. Wow. I didn't know that. Like I knew that there were people in my church illiterate. I knew that there were people in my family that were illiterate, but I didn't realize my father was illiterate until I was 21 years old. And it seems like I just had an awareness of how he was interacting with me. Because as a little girl, I would bring my homework to him and he would say, "Oh, it's nice. It's wonderful. You did a good job." It's like, "Okay, Daddy, thank you." And he would always say, "Do good in school." And if I showed him something, if I was reading a book, he would say, "Read me a page." And I would read him a page. And but now when I look back, I remember that my daddy always had a wad of paper in his pocket. And if someone asked him something like, "How do you get to Augusta, Georgia?" he would pull out this wad of paper and he would look through it. Because he was a truck driver and he would find these directions for people. Or if they asked him, how do you, what's someone's phone number? What's their address? He would pull out the wad of paper. And what I realized is that during his lifetime, when people gave him information, he collected it on pieces of paper. Wow. And he then memorized what was on each piece of paper. And when people would ask him things that were sort of usual information, he would just pull out this wad of paper and he would just go through it until he found what he thought was the information that they wanted. And that is how he was able to be a productive, illiterate adult. And so my why is that I know that has a lot to do with literacy, but mathematics is a language. My why is that I know that there are people who still don't understand what we know in terms of literacy, in terms of mathematics. And I just set myself on a course to do something about it, to help people understand what my area is, which is mathematics, but to understand mathematics in such a way that it doesn't embarrass, and it doesn't make people feel bad, and it doesn't make people feel less than. Because growing up as a little child, I saw how people were able to engage even if they couldn't read or write. But, you know, I now can do something about that, at least in the area of mathematics.
Yeah. I absolutely love that story. And I love the turn on the story of your dad, that he had this profound impact on you becoming an educator. I just love all of that and how that led you to be who you are today, and how you really saw the strength in him. And then also that became a vehicle for you to realize sometimes people don't understand and they're pretending to understand, or they're compensating in ways that I want to make it easier on people. It's a really beautiful story. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, well, and that brilliance of being able to memorize all that information
Right.
and have it, like, you know, so it's that ability to like have that visual cue, I'm presuming, on a paper that reminds and brings up that memory, and what a powerful memory and capacity for all of that knowledge was still there and still present and still so meaningful to other people that he came in contact with. And I think that that is just really striking to me, in that sense of, you know, that brilliance of like, oh, here it is, I have it, and knowing and cataloging all of that information is just so powerful.
But it's also like such a message that, you know, just because your father never learned to read, he was clearly a very smart person, that you never detected that he couldn't read until you were old enough to really look back and see what the clues were that you kind of missed along the way. And he led a very productive life that supported 8 children. You know, it's just a strong message that, you know, just because people don't have the skills that other people have does not mean that they're not smart.
That's right. That's right. He was such a wise man and such a giving man. So well known. He died at the age of 81, but, you know, so many people had such wonderful things to say about things he had fixed for them, or, you know, places he had taken them and things he had done for them. So it was really, he left an awesome legacy for us.
That's
amazing.
And that value of education that he passed to you too. So he valued, and it sounds like in both of your parents valued that so much, so that it's almost a gift that they give in many ways, and it may not be something that they hold themselves. And you know, I think so sometimes we walk away from that. It may be in the US, my family were immigrant, my dad's an immigrant, and so many of my uncles were functionally illiterate, and you know, but have done really well. But it's that generation of within a short period of time. So like my cousins and I have college degrees and then some, and you know, some of our children are medical professionals and doctor, and like, and it's that value of education, right? And so like seeing that for the gift that it is, because it's not everybody's gift, and I know I'm very privileged in that was always for my uncle a such a strong value, that he made sure that my dad had an education, and that began to be passed forward in that way. Is a powerful legacy that I think that those who come before us can lead.
for sure.
Yeah, you know, I also like to share, you know, some of that with my pre-service teachers when I teach them, because, you know, people say things like, you know, or they talk about children not having support at home. Let me tell you, I had no lack of love in my home. I had my parents, I had my 7 siblings and aunts and uncles. Love was in abundance. But when it came to things like mathematics and said, go home and someone help you with your homework, the skill was not there. The support for that particular act was not there. So we can't judge children who come to school and they've not completed their homework when they say, I didn't have help. We can't use that as an assumption that they don't have a good, solid family structure or a loving home. It just may be like myself. I had a father that was illiterate. I had a mother that only had an 8th grade education until she was 35 years old. We lived in such a small community. At the age of 35, they allowed her to go back to high school, not a GED. She went back to high school and was able to get her high school diploma. And they had to stop school because they had to work on the farms to help with their own families. And, you know, by the time I came along, being the youngest of 8 children, my brothers and sisters were working too, most of them, to try to help the family. If they, you know, my oldest ones were married and had their own families. And so I didn't have that support for the academics at home because there wasn't anyone who was able to guide me and help me in that way. So I just, you know, we have to just not make assumptions about the lives of children when they show up at school and they don't have that work done or they were not able to complete that project. It definitely may not be because they don't have a loving family. It could be that they just don't have the academic resource that some of us are privileged to have in our homes.
Right. Well, it's interesting that you say that right now, because I feel that in this time of COVID that I think lots of us are learning that it's really difficult to keep up with what children are supposed to be doing, even if I'm a pretty well-educated person. And I'll tell you, trying to keep up with the work that my 3 children are doing is really difficult. My kids have not been to school yet. They will start a hybrid model next week, but trying to keep track of what they have to do is no easy task. And I have a pretty strong education and I'm a teacher. So imagine for parents who are working outside of education, outside of the home, and also having to track all of that right now is almost comparable to what you speak of in your childhood. So, good Lord.
And I think for mathematics specifically, right? And so we have this, because that's the field that we're all working in. And when things went home in March for us here in Massachusetts, but in, you know, slightly different depending on where your location is, that was the thing that I started hearing it immediately from friends. So what am I going to do about the math? Or this teacher sent this math homework home. Or, well, now I'm teaching my kid to do the, you know, standard algorithm for, like, what are you going to do about that? And I was like, could you please not? Please.
Yeah.
You know, so it's that piece of understanding the mathematics and then understanding teaching for mathematics that it is your specialty that we want to talk about a bit now. So how do we make sense of the mathematics for teaching? And how do we distinguish between the two a little bit, just mathematics and then the teaching of mathematics? And if you could talk to us a little bit about how we make sense of that.
So that is such a very rich question, because there is a difference between knowing mathematics and knowing mathematics for teaching, or understanding mathematics and understanding mathematics for teaching. I'll give you some examples of that. So if I were to say 5 divided by 1/5, typically people start the algorithm in their mind, and there's a phrase for it: invert and multiply, or flip and change. 5 divided by 1/5 becomes 5 times 5/1, which is 5 times 5. 25 divided by 1, which is 25. So the answer is 25. 5 divided by 1/5 is 25. So that's the mathematics. But now if I ask you why, why does that algorithm work? What's the sense making behind the algorithm? That's the important question, because for two reasons. One, what if I get 5 divided by 1/5 and a child gives me an answer of 10?
Mhm.
I have to, as a teacher now, I know what the answer is 25. But I also have to think, why would that child have gotten an answer of 10? So I have to understand the potential errors that students can make when they are engaged in mathematics. Because if I get to why did the student get an answer of 10, as a teacher, I'm probably going to process this as, oh, they did 5 divided by 1/5. They said 5 times 5 over 1, and then they added the 2 5s and got 10 over 1 and said 10 divided by 1 is 10.
Yeah.
So now I'm understanding that the child probably knows something about the process, but is not able to take the process all the way. Maybe they are weak in their multiplication, for example. And so when they see 2 numerals, the easiest thing to do is to add them, and they get an answer of 10. So to know something about the mathematics for teaching is to be able to anticipate the typical errors that children are going to make, so that as a teacher, I'm prepared to deal with the error through questioning and scaffolding versus just saying the answer is not 10, just marking the kid's paper wrong. And the child never really understanding what the mistake was. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, we often say to children, check your work. But if you don't understand the process, you don't know how to go back and check.
Check to make sure it's right, even though you don't get it.
That's right. Yeah. Maybe a child saw 5 divided by 1/5 and thought, I don't know what else to do. I'm just going to multiply all the numbers that I see. So that's 5 times 5 is 25 times 1 is 25. So the answer is 25. Right. So guess what? You get a right answer, but the process is totally wrong. So how is the child going to go back and check the work when the process is wrong? Right. So that's the second thing that we need to know as a difference between knowing the mathematics and knowing the mathematics for teaching, is to anticipate the possible errors that lead to incorrect answers and to anticipate the possible errors that can lead to correct answers. And so that's why when I see the correct answer of 25, I need to come back to that student and ask, why? Why is it 25? So that I know the child is not just using a process, because all of us can learn processes and we can regurgitate algorithms, but it's the question of why does it work? So if I were working with the student with that, I would take them back to just whole numbers. Let's put fractions to the side for a moment. Let me just give you a whole number example. Say 9 divided by 3. You might ask, well, how many groups of 3 are there in 9? 1, 2, 3, that's 1 group. 4, 5, 6, that's 2 groups. 7, 8, 9, that's 3 groups. Okay, awesome. So 5 divided by 1/5 is the same question. How many groups of 1/5 are there in 5? So in 1, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because you got 5/5 in 1. In 2, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All the way to 5, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if I add those up, I have 25 1/5 in 5. So I need the understanding to go with the algorithm so that I know that I have a conceptual foundation for the mathematics. And as a teacher, I need to understand the mathematics just that deeply in order to guide the student to that place. Right. So that's one example. Let me give you one more example. If I say to one of you, what is a square? What's a square, Heidi?
Well, it's a 4-sided figure with 4 right angles.
4-sided figure with 4 right angles. So awesome. What is a rectangle, Molly?
Oh, I think a rectangle is what Heidi said. I think it's a 4-sided figure with 4 right angles.
Okay, now. So if you were students in the classroom, now we have 2 different terms and we have the same definition for each one. We got to figure that out because something is going on here. So I might ask students to then draw on a piece of paper what a square looks like and draw on a piece of paper what a rectangle looks like. And I may collect multiple samples of that, use my dot cam, show it to the class, or if we are working in Zoom or use a Google Sheet or, another piece of the platform to demonstrate what some of this work looks like so students can see what has been produced as examples of squares and examples of rectangles, and we'll have to have a conversation. And that needs to have a teacher that's confident in understanding the mathematics, because you have to figure out how to weave yourself out of that. Because if we say a four-sided figure with four right angles, well, is that a square? Is that a rectangle? Let's talk about it. Let's produce them. Let's draw them. Let's give some counter examples. What if the four right angles are situated this far apart? What is that? What if they're this far apart? What is that? What if they are positioned so that the four right angles will produce four sides that are the same length? What is that? And so it gets us to the real heart of the definitions versus things like a square has four sides that are the same length. Well, so does a rhombus, but it's not a square. Or a rectangle has two long sides and two short sides.
Oh, yeah.
Some of them, but not all of them.
Right. Right.
Yeah, so it's knowing the mathematics in such a rich way that we're able to engage students in these explorations of the content versus just simply saying, do as I do. That doesn't really help anyone. You know what? I didn't know Pythagoras was a person until I was in college.
Right.
Like the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Give me the right triangle, I could do that all day. But guess what? It wasn't until I was in college and the professor started talking about Pythagoras like he was real. I'm like, that's the person.
Right.
Like, I was like astounded. Like I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't want kids to have to wait that long.
Right.
Until they get to college. And my story. I wasn't good in mathematics when I was young. And I look back on that and I know that the potential was there all the time, but I just didn't have the experiences that I needed to have. I don't regret that. I don't have hard feelings against anyone because of that. I just know the reality is I could have known that I was good at mathematics when I was 6 or 7, but I just didn't have the opportunity for that. But I'm glad I know it now. So
Right.
Right. But I think that you're right about that, right? That, we all grow up in whatever way that we grow up mathematically. And as you learn more about mathematics, and I'm with you, Thomasina, I feel that I learned more about math after having been a math major. I learned more about math when I had to teach it. Mm-hmm. That's when all my questions came, because then I really had to know, and I was under the gun and somebody was going to ask me questions. So that's when I really started to learn the why. And thank goodness I had a mentor that I worked with who was as close to retirement as I was to, just having been in school. And she really could teach me a lot of those whys. And then I had to figure out, well, how am I going to teach this? Because this is not the way I learned. And it's a whole different way of learning, but that's why we do this, right? I mean, I think that you became a math teacher unbeknownst to you, sort of, right? You hadn't really planned on doing that. And here you are making such a difference in the field of mathematics that it was clearly meant to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how do we help teachers? And I know that some of your projects will do this. How do we help teachers acquire that special knowledge of mathematics for teaching?
So I've been working, I have some colleagues that are so dear to me, Julie Dixon and Ed Nolan. And I've been working with Julie. I've known her 30 years. We were in graduate school together. And I met Ed through Julie. He was actually working on NCTM's math notes with her at the time. We just, we are mathematically alike. We appreciate the same things about the mathematics and understanding the mathematics. And we've had so many conversations in hotel rooms and airports and at conferences, just hanging out together. So many conversations around what can we do to support mathematics teaching and learning. And so the outgrowth of that has been so phenomenal. One being our book series, Making Sense of Mathematics for Teaching, published by Solution Tree. It's a 4-part series, K2, 3, 5, 6, 8, and high school. And across all 4 of those books, we have the same message. So the content is certainly different. The progression of the mathematics is different. But there is something that's core across those 4 books. And it's core to who we are as mathematics educators, and it's core to what we do when we work with teachers across the nation, which we're doing so virtually now. But it's what we call the TQE process. So first and foremost, what we believe is that the task is the heart of mathematics. And of course, the task is an outgrowth of the learning goal. So knowing what a learning goal is, what the objective of a learning goal is, what the intent of a learning goal is so important, because when we understand the learning goal, then we can either create tasks or we can find tasks in teacher editions and other resources to bring to the students to fuel their mathematics learning. So choosing tasks to open up a lesson and picking the right thing that's going to get students talking and get students to a place where they can access the mathematics and be challenged is so important. And so one of the things that we do when we do professional development, we always start with the task. We always start talking about, the mathematics through the lens of a task that we've selected. Because if you don't get the tasks right, either your opening task and everything else that you do, then the lesson is not going to yield what we want it to yield. So I'm also a textbook author. And as a textbook author, when I was new to that particular work, it was awesome. It's like I'm getting, the opportunity to put stuff in these textbooks, And by the way, let me just tell you this. So my son at the time, he was in 3rd grade. This is a sidebar. He was in 3rd grade, and in our district, they had adopted the textbook, the mathematics textbook that I had written. So I went to his teacher and I said, listen, I know you're using the textbook. It has, my name is in the teacher's edition and all of that. It's not in the student's edition. I didn't do any of that work around Kurt. That's my son's name. I purposely kept it away from him. So when you're using the textbook for your class, please don't tell him that I'm an author, because I don't want him to feel as if he has to rise to this occasion and get everything right because mommy wrote the book. So she said she understood, and it was awesome. And a couple of months later, Kurt came home with some homework. He was working on place value. And I looked at his page. The teacher had torn it out of the student's edition. And I looked at the page. He had all of them wrong. And I'm thinking, you can't send him back to school with all this stuff. I wrote the book.
That would be embarrassing.
Yes. So I said, okay, I'm going to take off my mommy hat, put on my teacher hat. So I said to Kurt, I want you to go back and I want you to check your work and bring your paper back to me. So he did. He comes back, they're still wrong. And I said to him, well, Kurt, don't worry about all of them. I just want you to look at, I'll make up a number, look at number 5. And I just want you to work on number 5 and try to figure out what you've done wrong there. He comes back, it's still wrong. I said, Kurt, maybe I need to sit down with you and help you with this. And he looks up at me and he says, I don't think you know much about this. I wrote the book. I don't know what you're talking about.
That's excellent. But did you not say that? Did you sit there and just...
Yeah, you don't know anything.
Not to say to him, what do you mean I don't know much about it? I wrote that.
No, just maybe a little bit.
Yes. So I went, I saw his teacher a couple of days later. I told her what had happened, and she laughed at me and she said, no, you don't know much about it. You should have had me as a teacher. So, no, it's okay. But I really wanted to say to him, I wrote the book, Joker. I let it ride.
Well, maybe Kurt knows now.
Yeah. Yes. So what we have to say about the task is, if you don't get the tasks right, then the learning is going to go down the drain. So as a textbook author, I appreciate textbooks, but I still have to admit it's probably not a good idea to just say to the kids, do all the odd ones.
Right.
Because the odd ones may not be the best ones. Or it's not a good idea to just say, do 1 through 10, because maybe 11 was the best task. And so as a teacher, we want teachers to look at tasks and find those tasks that are rich in the mathematics, meaningful in the mathematics, and most importantly, that line up with the learning goal. What is it you are trying to teach? Your task should fit that learning goal. Because if the task is outside of the learning goal, you're not wasting time, but you're wasting mathematics time if you are focused on the learning goal. So choosing the task is so important. And once you choose the right tasks for your students, it's being prepared with productive questions. Not the questions that will just get you a numerical response and you're done, or yes and no and you're done, or true and false and you're done. It's the questions that will advance the learning of the students. Questions that start with things like, how do you know? Why is that the case? What if we did this? So questions that are going to push the learning forward. What is an example? What is a counterexample? So if we're working on square, I may ask questions like, if a student draws a shape on a paper and says this is a square and it's wrong, I may say, well, draw me something that's not a square. Can you draw something that's not a square? Or can you draw a square that looks different than that square? And so it's having the readiness to ask those questions that are going to move learning forward. And then the third part of the TQE process, so it's task, questions, and evidence, is what are we going to do with the evidence that students give us in their answers? So students' responses are either going to line up with the learning goal or be contrary to the learning goal. How am I going to use that evidence to either modify the task, modify the question, change the experience, use a different manipulative? There's something that I need to do with that information other than saying it's right or it's wrong. Because that doesn't really get us anywhere. It's like baking a cake. You bake a cake, you pull it out of the oven, it falls down. Okay, so you did something wrong. Yeah. Anyone can see that. The question is, what is it that you did? What did you do wrong with that cake? Yeah. So that is what we try to do. We try to figure out what is it you've done, whether it's right or wrong. We don't focus on just the wrong parts. It's even if it's right. Children still deserve to be questioned on what they've done that's right, so that you can know that they understand the mathematics.
I love that they deserve to be questioned. I really like that. And then that's cyclical. We go around and around. Now that evidence leads me to the next task. And as I prep, I think of my questions. And then we keep going.
Right. And, we've done that K through 12, pre-K to 12. And it works in every case. It works with all mathematics. So that is the structure that we use as a lens to do our work, because it does work for every grade, for every student, for every part of mathematics content. It's very transparent in that way.
Yeah. It's and now more than ever, this is important, because the time is of the essence for all teachers, where they don't have as much time as they would have in a typical year to teach the content. At least here in Massachusetts, our teachers do not have as much time as they would typically have. So you really need to make the most of your time in choosing those most important tasks. I was working with teachers the other day and saying, you don't have to do every task. You pick the one that's going to tell you the information that you need. Do that task.
Do that task.
Right, exactly. So Thomasenia, this leads into our last question for you. And I know you have quite a list. So what are you working on now?
Oh boy, I'm working on.
You don't have to tell us all of it. It's quite long.
So I do want to share a few of these things that I'm working on. One, I am very privileged and proud to be an associate editor for the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics' newest journal, Mathematics Teaching, Learning and Teaching Mathematics, pre-K to 12. That journal, as you know, took the place of the 3 practitioner journals, the elementary, middle, and high school journal. So it is designed to satisfy the audience across mathematics grade bands. And as an associate editor for the journal, it's, I have the privilege of being a voice and helping others be a voice in mathematics education. So as an editor, yes, I am reading manuscripts and we're making decisions on manuscripts, but I'm also recruiting authors. I get on Twitter and I just put an invitation out to colleagues, come write for MTLT. I see colleagues at conferences. I just walk up to total strangers who just finished their presentation, and I say, you know what, that presentation could be an article in MTLT. And I give them my NCTM card. So it is recruiting others to share their voice in mathematics education. With being an associate editor, each of us have a department that we work on. So myself and 2 other colleagues, we were facilitating the Centennial Department. Well, that's about to come to a close as NCTM finishes out celebrating 100 years. So we're pretty much finished with that department. But we are introducing a new department. It's called Teaching is a Journey. And it's an opportunity for teachers to share their voice about, how they became a mathematics teacher or how they've been able to work through struggles and things that have been a hindrance to becoming an effective teacher of mathematics, but now they are successful. So it's really exciting to be a part of the editorial board for NCTM and work on that journal. A second thing that, of course, I'm always trying to present at conferences. So I will be at NCTM 2021 in St. Louis, or we'll be virtual in St. Louis. But I'll present at NCTM, and I'll present on the topic of, from my girls' book, actually, where I will talk about perceptions, what perceptions are driving how we engage girls in mathematics. I'll talk about practices. What practices can we do to support girls in mathematics? And I'll also talk about priorities. If we truly believe that girls are able to learn mathematics in the same ways that boys are, because there's no math boy brain and math girl brain, then what priorities should we be engaged in to make that happen? So I'll talk about that at NCTM. And I'm hoping to be able to talk at the research pre-session on another project that I've been working on. It's called Algebra Nation. It's actually a project that's designed to support students in Algebra 1. And I hope to talk about that at the research session. So find me at NCTM 2021 in April. Let's see, in September, I'll be at NCSM, where I will deliver the lecture. Actually, it's the 2020 lecture, but we didn't have NCTM 2020. But I'll deliver the Kay Gilliland Equity Lecture. So I was selected for that award, and the lecture was postponed until next year. So I'm really, really excited about that. I should do well because I worked on it to give it this year.
You have an extra year of practice.
That's right. So I'll do that at NCSM in September in Atlanta next year. So that's always, NCSM and NCTM, I'm always trying to be there and working on those presentations. I also, I mentioned working with Ed and Julie on DNA Mathematics at dnamath.com. The audience can learn more about our books, the 4-part series, as well as the accompanying book that focuses on teaching girls, making sense of mathematics for teaching girls. And also there's making sense of mathematics for the pool small group that others on our team have worked on.
Yeah,
so that book is there too. And
I own them all there. I can give a big shout out. Like I big thumbs up, well used in this household. And we really have learned so much through reading those.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So yes, we are always, putting out our messaging around making sense of teaching mathematics, whether it's the white papers or presentations. We try to present together at conferences, and then the PD that we engage in across the nation to support teachers as not just teachers of mathematics, but also to support teachers as learners of mathematics, to go back to that place of learning this for the sake of teaching is so valuable and so important. So those are some of the things that I've been working on recently.
Great.
Yeah. Like there's no sleeping, I think, on your part. It is
Right.
it's like
Right.
there is so many just amazing projects that you're working on, and we have been, like we said, fortunate enough to hear you speak and learn from you, and have just we were so excited that you were going today. So it is just really exciting, and we appreciate you being here so much and sharing all the wonderful things that you're doing and with us and with our audience today.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Yes, one other thing I just want to say is it's just so important that we treat mathematics with the respect that it deserves, because for people to be productive, active citizens now, we need mathematics literacy. We need to understand what we're reading on the news, in the charts, and the tables, and the graphs, and on social media. We need all of that. So mathematics is just critical.
Absolutely.
That hasn't become evident in the last 8 months. It never will.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today. We really, really appreciate it. We love to hear about all of the things that you're doing, and we hope that you'll come back.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right.
All right. Thank you, Thomasina.
So we're gonna close the show with just some reminders. If you liked what you learned there, we always continue that conversation in our Math Together learning community. So if you want to hop on that wait list, that's something you can do. There's so many good thoughts that we want to continue that discussion. So you can find information and ways to continue that conversation at looneymath.com. And also, we've got a list of free support and free resources that you can check out there. We really strongly believe that we need to come together and just be a place where we're helping each other out right now. And the other thing that you can do there is, if you're looking for a short, brief conversation, we're setting up coffee chats where you can sign up for those, and we can work with you to address a problem, share some resources, and just support you in the hard work that you're doing as an educator.
Yes, we absolutely appreciate all that each of you are doing and you're teaching, and we want to support you where we can. And around that, something that we have been hearing quite a bit about from the teachers that we work with in the schools that we support is this idea about, what are we doing about assessment, and what is that going to look like this year? And so we have some thoughts on that. We have been doing some research around this. We have been talking amongst ourselves and listening to other colleagues, and we're going to have a discussion on assessment and what that should and should not look like in this year, and how we go about implementing, supporting our students, and finding out what they really know and are able to do with assessment. So that's our discussion for next week. We hope that you will join us Thursday regular time at 7. And if you can't be here with us live, you can always watch later.
Right. So thanks for being here with us today. Thank you to Thomasina, and remember to always be curious.
Good night, everyone.
Take care.